in the spirit of that, Josh is going to get to have round two with the gang of four. Boy, that's a whole different podcast right there, Josh. Yes, anyway, why don't you run the numbers for us? Hopefully it's less than 5.
Yes. Solid Gold by Gang of Four. This is from 1981, and it is 577th on the top albums of the 80s. It is 67th in the top albums of 81, which I did not include in the previous stats. And it is their second best album out of 12, with the first being Entertainment, which we talked about a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago at this point.
Right. About the, oh, wow, so they have 12 full albums.
That's what it says, yep.
I did not remember that from the bio we did. All right. So I am going to get to pick it this time. Let's go ahead, and I am going to pick a couple that were interesting.
Choice cuts here.
I'm going to go with What We All Want as the pick. Yep. Okay, so what we all want is to hear Josh's take on Solid Gold from the Gang of Four.
Man, this was a solid gold record for my ears, that's for sure. As I said, I was really high on their debut album. It was really unexpected, and I think we all appreciated it to one extent or another. And this one also seems like a step up for them, mainly because they seem to have really taken from funk and soul and put some tasty bass lines throughout this album. And
oh, for sure. That's the rhythm section was all over this album.
Yes, they really had a groove on it to the extent that it was really shocking. It was like merging their first album with kind of like funk and to some extent, and it really reminded me. I'd be surprised if the Red Hot Chili Peppers didn't respond to this or know of this album, because there was things in
I
here
did not
with
think
the
of
bass
them. Yeah.
that reminded me, and kind of their sound, as Matt pointed out before in our review, is very staccato. The guitars are kind of stop start and all over the place, and I feel like that coupled with the bass lines really reminded me of some Red Hot Chili Peppers.
You know what the rhythm section reminded me of is the Talking Heads a lot. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I didn't hear the drums as much. The bass is like really what stood out for me from the first track. Also, in the second track, What We All Want, which you said, the start really sounded like a Rage Against the Machine song.
Yeah. You didn't hear there was a lot of like cymbal, like
yes,
in the sound. Did you? That. Yeah. Okay. Gotcha. Yeah.
Yep. And but the percussion is different than. I don't know. I did hear the percussion on the first album that we talked about more. I'd have to go back and listen to this again. But they are still, despite incorporation of funk and strong bass lines, and I really can't stress that enough. That was really kind of the hallmark to this album for me. They're still incorporating, they still maintain their sound. Their lyrics are still very political and socially conscious and punchy and clever.
Satirical, I would say.
Yes. Especially on songs like Hole in the
Cheeseburger.
Cheeseburger. Is that the first time we've heard spoken dialogue to open a song too? Like,
I think so.
Like
well, maybe not
or something.
Maybe not first, but definitely, maybe some Doors albums I think might have some spoken word in there. Yeah, but not many. Yeah.
And so that is still a strong current. I feel like this album is a great complement to the first album. If you liked Entertainment, you're definitely gonna like this. I don't know if I would say it's better. I'd say it's on the same level for sure. And it just, this is another album that in some ways is complex like Out of Shape is, but it's also an album that you can, I don't know, I find the Gang of Four, I can really get on their wavelength for some reason, even though it is kind of atonal at times and jarring, but it's jarring in a way that really works for me. So yeah, this is another big endorsement from me. I'm very impressed with this band after 2 albums.
Yeah, I liked this album. I didn't like it as much as Entertainment. Let me start with that. Mm-hmm. It is an interesting marriage because the rhythm section stood out to me in the first album as well. Don't get me wrong, but what they're doing here is definitely like funk. Right. Like funk, even at time, not all the way, but even a little bit of like what disco does at times, like just a roaring bass. And like I said, it is kind of like the Talking Heads in that the bass is prominent in songs. But I know Josh said he didn't mention, I noticed the drums all over this. Now, it's not like thudding rock drums, right? It's more the drums, like dexterous drums that complement the bass, which you don't hear very often, where the bass takes the lead and the drums goes away. That's, I think, what made it similar to the Talking Heads for me. Like normally if the rhythm section's strong, I think the Who, right? You hear both of them together like pounding like away.
John Bonham or something like that.
Right, and that it's the drums up front and then the bass kind of weaving around it. This, it's the bass is up front and the drums are kind of playing to it, almost like, the only place, like I said, the 2 big areas are like jazz goes like that sometimes, like a walking, when you have a walking bass line or something in there. Now, there's not a lot of walking bass lines in this album, but the bass is there, or funk. They're the 2 areas where that happens. So the rhythm section is big there. There's a darting guitar on this that's at times frantic, playing in the background. And the thing that kind of always I do appreciate the political lyrics of the Gang of Four. They're very interesting to listen to and at times funny as well.
Yes.
And they're also sort of cynical without being so cynical that it overwhelms the general message of it. Like it doesn't beat you over the head, I'd say. It's more just observational.
Yeah, it's a very they walk a really fine line in terms of kind of like serving up, like, don't you guys, almost like incredulous, like, don't you guys see this happening all around you or something to that effect without being, proselytizing. Right.
I something that holds me back a little bit with the Gang of Four is the lyricism is a little bit monotone, I'd say at times. And I don't know if it I think I'd like both albums, but especially this one, it stood out in more because it wasn't I wouldn't say it's a net negative in either of them, but it wasn't for me a little bit of the liability that was on this album on Entertainment. In this one, I did get a little bit of the vibe where there's not enough variation in the voice, I'd say. And it's a really fine line when you sort of sing monotone, whether you're Ian Curtis of Joy Division or later, the New Order guys, doing that, or Depeche Mode, or anybody who sort of goes monotone for a long period of time. It can kind of wear on you a little bit, and I did a little bit wear on me in this album. I found this to be a pretty dark album, to be quite honest. It isn't so much darker lyrically. It just has a darker feel to it, which is odd to say about a funk album.
Yeah.
Because, you think, when you add funk to it, right? It's like kind of like how David Bowie, Station to Station, it kind of masked, the funk sound kind of masked, like, I'm coming apart at all ends of it a little bit. And I think there's a little bit of that here as well, where if you're not careful, you can be lulled into following the rhythm section and not realize that there's like a weightiness and a darkness to the album. But I still liked it. Yeah. And I like it as a complementary piece to Entertainment. I really do. Yeah.
Yeah. It is kind of so in the groove at the time. Like you could be like kind of moving back and forth to it and not realize what they're saying or be almost like in a trance with the vocal delivery. I hear what you're saying about the lead singer's vocals, but
it gets a little samey. Even some of the guitar parts are a little samey at times, even though they're weaving in, and they weave kind of the same ways. And maybe it's because I listened to the variation of the Elvis Costello album, or we're going to do the B-52s later, and certainly the Raincoats, and they kind of have a palette that's all over the place a little bit, and maybe it suffered less because of what it was and more in terms of the company it was in. But I think that would be my one criticism, that at times I would have liked a little bit more variation in terms of the overall sound.
Yep.
Like
no, I think that's fair. I think that's fair. But still solid record for me.
What is it about the Gang of Four that you think speaks to you so much, Josh? Because you've been pretty effusive with your praise in both albums.
Yeah, that's what it's kind of not always. Well, one of my favorite bands is Spoon. So I started hearing, I don't know if you know them, but they kind of remind me of this. They have some kind of noise rock elements to them, but they also kind of have atonal guitars at times as well. But it's something about their guitar, their kind of off-kilter guitar playing combined with their lyrics that don't always that you don't always pick up on after the first listen. I feel like there's some depth here, and there is a refreshing, I don't know, there's a punk spirit to them that I really appreciate as well. And with all the other artists that we've listened to in this time, they stand out for me as sounding different than a lot of other bands.
Gotcha. So they kind of have elements of the punk you like, but coming from a vantage point that you think is different than the peers.
Yeah. I mean, not to preview our next episode, but they're kind of in line with the Dead Kennedys on that end of the spectrum a little bit in terms of lyrical.
In some ways.
Yes. Not like musically necessarily, but in terms of the message they're trying to get across, maybe.
Yeah, I think one's like, "Can you believe this?" and the other is like, "Can you believe this?" Yeah, so that's
well, hit you over that with a hammer.
Yeah. So, but we'll save that for things. So yeah, I like this one. I would start with Entertainment though first. I feel that and once again, this would be another one to kind of travel the road. I'd be really fascinated to see where they evolve to, or how they evolve.
Yeah. And I totally get. I think this band is. I could totally get why somebody would be off. Feel off put. What am I trying to say?
They'd be off-putting to someone.
Yes, exactly. Because their sound is, abrasive or jarring at times, and sometimes that's enough right away for people to, not respond to it.
I think the fact that this is so firmly in the post-punk realm of things, and I think it's very interesting to me that you didn't respond to Joy Division, but you respond to Gang of Four so much, because in some ways they're kind of traveling some of the same paths. Yeah. Well, I don't want to preview my thoughts on that album.
Well,
too. Right. Well, and Wire is another band that's in that space, I feel like.
And Wire, I would say I liked a lot more than Joy Division, and would kind of lump them in with Gang of Four. Well,
and I did not just Wire, Pink Flag. I did Chairs Missing and 213 as well. And so I got to kind of see, and they're all very different. And yeah, some of what's happening here with this album is some of the same stuff that Wire's doing later.
Yeah.
On their album. So those would be ones, if you ever get extra time, Josh, I would have you search those out, because they were interesting listens.
Nice. Yeah.
All
so
right.
Whatever this post-punk, slice of the Venn diagram that they're in.
Well, gosh, we've been living in a post-punk world for the last 7 episodes. So we're going to be there for quite a while in the 80s too, because post-punk doesn't exactly end anytime soon. So we'll get the whole kaleidoscope of post-punk.